Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be discussing Batman vs Superman. I'll also be comparing it to Captain America Civil War because in my opinion both Marvel and DC have put out two very good versus movies, if you will. These are basically battles that we've been wanting to see for a while now. We've wanted to see come to life in a sense. So without further ado, let's get right into it. I'm going to go ahead and start with my review of Batman vs Superman. Now, starting off, I already know that there has been mixed reviews. Some people liked it, some people loved it, some people didn't like it that much but didn't have a problem with it, and then some people just outright hated it. If you're wondering where I stand, I personally stand on I liked it. I didn't love the film as much as I wanted to, I'll be honest there. I love both DC and Marvel, but in the case of delivering the better versus movie, I'm going to have to give it to Marvel, and I'm going to have to give it to Captain America Civil War. Now, that isn't to say that Batman v Superman didn't stand up to him. As a matter of fact, Batman vs Superman was a decent movie in its own right. We see the effects of Man of Steel. We see how in Man of Steel, starring Henry Cavill as Superman, of course, we see basically the ramifications of the decisions he made in that movie, and his choice to become Superman, his choice to protect the citizens of Metropolis, and even we see in Batman vs Superman, citizens of the world. More on that later. But starting off, we see in Batman vs Superman, we see the effects of Man of Steel. We see Bruce Wayne, played by Ben Affleck, who I felt was actually a decent Batman. We see him going through Metropolis, and we see him trying to get to Wayne Financial. And for those of you who don't know, Wayne Financial is owned by Bruce Wayne, of course, and because Bruce Wayne actually has many different companies. He has Wayne Industries, Wayne Financial, Wayne Construction, so on and so forth. He's a very rich man. Anyway, Bruce Wayne is trying to get to Wayne Financial, and he sees Superman fighting Zod, and we get to see the basically an outsider's looking in view of Superman and Zod basically flying through the air, fighting, Superman pushing Zod, the lasers coming from their eyes, the heat vision coming from their eyes, cutting the building, and we find out that the building that Zod in Man of Steel was that Zod and Superman fighting in, when Zod first uses his heat vision to cut down the building and try to bring it down on top of them both, we find out that's actually Wayne Financial. And we see that Bruce Wayne is, again, he's trying to get everybody out of that building, he's trying to save everyone, trying to be the hero, because of course, you know, you can't have normal humans fighting around two superpowered beings like this. Somebody's gonna get hurt, and unfortunately people do get hurt. We know that one man dies as he's talking to Bruce Wayne, one of the few people who has a direct line to Bruce Wayne, or Bruce Wayne has a direct line to him. He dies, unfortunately, and again, it's very tragic, but at the same time, you kind of understand why he had to die. You know, move the story forward in a sense. And we also see the building come down, and we see a man who's basically a giant steel beam has fallen on his legs, and so he's pinned down. He can't move, can't lift the steel beam. And we see Bruce Wayne go to help him. Other workers go to help Bruce Wayne lift up the steel beam off the man so he can move. They drag him out because his legs are broken. And then we see Bruce Wayne look over, and we see a little girl who's about to get crushed. Bruce Wayne is fast enough to save her, and she's crying, asking for her mom, and he tells her, "We'll find your mom. Where was she last?" And the little girl points up to the building, and that's when you realize her mom was in the building, and her mom was one of the people that died. And so we see Bruce Wayne holding the little girl, comforting her, and we see this look on his face, this look of not only rage, but this look of disbelief. Basically, like, he couldn't believe. It's rage and disbelief mixed together, if that makes sense. This feeling of helplessness. And we see that look on Bruce Wayne's face, and we know exactly how he feels, because we know at this point he can't stand up to Superman. He can't stand up to Superman, let alone two superpowered beings, both who have the same amount of power. And we see Superman then go on to, we see Superman still as Clark Kent, still working at the Daily Planet. We see him, keep up the charade, and we see him be Superman, whenever he can, save people, at a moment's notice. And again, we see people start to dislike Superman for these actions in Man of Steel. And I can't really say I blame them, but at the same time, I do think that those people are stupid. More on that later. Anyway, we see basically the whole country, mixed, split in half, almost. We see people hate Superman, we see people love Superman. We see people like Batman, we see people not like Batman. Because at this time, Batman, it's unknown whether he's come out of retirement. I don't think so. I actually think that in this universe, Batman has been Batman for quite a while, because this is supposed to be an older Batman. This is supposed to be Batman based off of the Dark Knight Returns series, and not a direct adaptation, no, but again based off of. Hence Ben Affleck being chosen for the role, being how old he is, I believe 45. Correct me if I'm wrong. But again, being the age Ben Affleck is, chosen to portray a older Batman, and I really think it suits Batman. I really do, because again, this movie is based off of Dark Knight Returns, and it is also based off another great comic that I enjoyed reading. More on that later. Anyway, we also see Lex Luthor. We're introduced to Lex Luthor, played by Jesse Eisenberg. I will say that Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor is a little bit too eccentric. He's more of a Riddler. It would be like if the Riddler and if Lex Luthor were put together. He has the cunning down, the cunning, smarts, plans, backstabbing, everything like that. He has it down perfectly. He has, but again, it's too eccentric. The attitude is too out there. Almost like if he was, like he was trying to play the Riddler and Lex Luthor combined. Now, that being said, Jesse Eisenberg, again, he's a great actor. I loved him in Zombieland. That's pretty much the only movie anyone really knows him from, huh? But I do like him in Zombieland. Again, he's a great actor. He did a good job portraying his own version of Lex Luthor. He really did. I'll give him that. Moving on from that, we see Batman attend a banquet held by Lex Luthor. Or not held by Lex Luthor, held by a private organization, if I remember correctly. But Lex Luthor is basically being awarded for something. And we also see Superman there, because he's undercover as Clark Kent, reporting, doing his job. And Bruce Wayne pops up, and we see Clark ask, "Who is that?" And the other another cameraman asks, oh, well, you must not get out often. That's Bruce Wayne. And so, for some reason, Superman thinks it's a good idea to get a story on Bruce Wayne. Um, Talking to Bruce Wayne, because as we all know, again, Bruce Wayne is one of the most influential people of Gotham City. He basically runs Gotham City. And so I believe that's why Clark decided it was a good idea to ask him a few questions, because up until this point, everyone's heard stories of the Batman in Gotham City and the vigilante of Gotham City. And so Superman, feeling that Batman is taking the law into his own hands, thus not really liking Batman as much as Batman doesn't like Superman, there's the conflict. So we see Clark Kent go up and try to talk to Bruce Wayne, and we see a conversation between them that, in my opinion, was actually very well acted out. It was great. The words were great. The conversation was just basically almost cut the tension with a knife. And basically, Superman goes up to Batman, and them not knowing who each other is, obviously. He says, I just wanted to ask you a few questions about Gotham City. How do you feel about the Bat Vigilante running around Gotham City? And Bruce Wayne and him exchange some words, and they end up staring each other down. We see Batman tell Superman, well, maybe, he said, maybe Gotham City has had a bad history of freaks dressed like clowns. Obviously, a reference to the Joker. And that kind of sticks something in Superman's craw, because again, they end up staring each other down. And then we hear Lex say, boys, boys, boys. Claps, he says, Clark Kent meets Bruce Wayne. Basically, we know who they are, and by Lex Luthor saying that, it kind of makes us wonder if he already knows who they are, too. More than likely not. Obviously not. But the fact of, he says, I love bringing people together. Kind of makes you wonder that. So, Clark Kent they both shake Lex Luthor's hands, they have a few choice words, and Lex Luthor goes to accept his award, and we see one of Superman's powers being used more effectively, I should say, than in Man of Steel. Super hearing. Well, the ability to hear different frequencies, I would say, to pick up on frequencies. We didn't get to see that in Man of Steel. Obviously, he has super hearing, but what many people don't know is that in the comics, he can actually hear different frequencies as well. He can actually even see frequencies in some comics, such as the Tower of Babel storyline. More on that later. Anyway, we see Batman have his earpiece, and he's listening to Alfred because Batman is looking for something. And Superman hears Alfred, of course doesn't see him, so he's like, who's this talking to Bruce? So he follows Bruce a little bit. And Batman goes into this computer room, a bunch of computers there, and he goes to stick a chip, I believe it was, onto wires, basically to steal the data. And this is where we are introduced to Wonder Woman, because Bruce has seen her there at that party, obviously, but she's more of she's more of a mysterious figure. We don't quite know who she is when she's looking at Bruce. Why, she just kind of stares at him, then walks away, gives off that creeper vibe. But then, once Bruce goes to go back to pick up the data that he stole, and Superman goes off to save a little girl that from a fire that he hears that is in Brazil, by the way. Bruce sees that it's gone. And then he sees the woman and she's leaving, and he goes to follow her. She gets away. And so she gets away, and he's left to wonder who she is. Superman is shown on TV saving the little girl from the fire, and this is where we really see the people that love Superman come into play. Because again, this is in Brazil, and there are people who are very religious, and all around the world, and Brazil, is no exception. Many cultures worship different things: Buddhism, Christianity, Catholicism, even Satanism. Many cultures worship many things, and the Aztecs worshipped many different gods, as do the Hindus. Now, I'm not saying that's taken into effect here, but what I'm saying is, Superman saves the girl. He hands her off to some officials so they can take care of her. And here again, we see people who love Superman, but also see him as something more than just a man with powers. They basically see him as a god, or maybe they even see him as they see him as a god, but maybe they even see him as a god that they worship. They happen to worship a god reborn, if you will, because we see Superman standing there, and he happens to look up to the sky, kind of, and everyone is just reaching out, and everyone's trying to touch him, and of course the closest people to him are touching him, but there's kind of a group around him, and so they're just reaching out, basically almost like Jesus in the Bible, when Jesus was walking through town and people were worshiping him, and the lady who was very sick reached out to touch Jesus and was healed when she touched his cloak. And so again, we see people almost worshiping Superman in a sense, and it's understandable. The reason I say that is because here we see, some being from another planet with extraordinary powers, and obviously Superman's from another planet, but not many people, I guess, know that in this universe. But again, we see somebody who does extraordinary things, can fly at super speeds, can, has heat vision, X-ray vision, super hearing. They might not know all his abilities, but all they know is that he uses them to help save people. And so it's like they see him as they possibly see him as God, or even as a god that they worship. Moving on from that, so we see the next thing that we see is again, Superman kind of getting in trouble by Perry, his boss, for trying to do stories on the Batman, because again, Superman doesn't like Batman's way of justice, so to speak, beating up the criminals and then branding them with a bat symbol, and once they go to jail, not killing them but branding them with that symbol, and then once they go to jail, it's basically death, because then the other inmates know, oh crap, if Batman was after this guy did something pretty damn bad. And so again, it's basically like death in prison if you have that bat symbol branded onto you. Anyway, again, Superman gets in trouble. Perry tells him, you don't get to decide what the right thing is to report. Nobody cares about Clark Kent taking on Batman. And we see Superman and Lois. We see their relationship more. We see that they've become a couple, and we see that they've grown as a couple a little bit in their year together. Because at this time it's been 18 months since the events of Man of Steel. And so again, we see them as a couple, and we see them growing, kind of getting towards, kind of they're caring about each other and such. And so we see that Superman would do anything to protect Lois, and by anything I mean anything. Anyway, we see Superman. The next thing we see is the man who was paralyzed at the very beginning of the movie that I told you about, who had the steel beam. Now he's paralyzed, and he's in a wheelchair. And supposedly, Bruce Wayne's company sends him money every month as compensation, but apparently he doesn't use it, or he just saves it, and just uses whatever he needs to just get by and buy food, because we see that he lives in kind of a rinky-dink apartment, and I'll tell you why here. I'll tell you that more here in a minute. But we see Lex Luthor trying to talk to a senator, and this senator's, she's on the fence. She's on the fence of whether Superman is good, or whether he's bad. And we see many people asking these questions. We see news, whole news coverage on it. We even see the senator being interviewed, and he asks her, the question is there a need for Superman? And she doesn't respond for a quick minute, but she said, then she looks and she said at him and says, I'm saying there is a Superman. Not really answering his question per se, but basically saying that there's a Superman and there's not much we can do about him at the moment. Now, up until this point, we also learned that kryptonite is a thing in this universe, and kryptonite is Superman's weakness, and we actually get to see it in effect in the movie. We see, after Lex Luthor fails to bribe that female senator, he goes to bribe another senator, and he succeeds. He gains access to the ship, to Zod's old ship. He gains access to the kryptonite. He gains access to basically anything that he wants. And that's bad. We see that the kryptonite, he tests the kryptonite on Zod, and they find out that kryptonite can basically damages the DNA, cuts the skin, yada yada. They're basically weakened by kryptonite. And so Lex proposes to that female senator to use it as a weapon. She says no. So the next thing we see is Lex at the Capitol building, where Superman is, I believe, supposed to be put on trial, because Lex convinces the paralyzed man to talk to the female senator and try to put Superman on trial for what he's done, supposedly. For his actions, so he can hold responsibility for his actions. Hashtag not Civil War. So we see Superman come to the building, and this is also where we see the other side of the fence of Superman, the people who hate him, because we see people outside the Capitol building, of course, with signs. One side is love Superman, Superman we love you, yada yada. The other side again, like in most hot button topics, you're gonna have that other side that doesn't agree, and we see people with signs that say aliens are not welcome here, this is America, God hates aliens, yada yada. Basically, again, what you would naturally see if this were a real-life situation. Again, going on, Superman goes into the Capitol building, and the man is in his wheelchair, his new wheelchair, I might add, that was donated to him by Lex Luthor. And you'll see why it's important here in a minute. Anyway, so the senator is talking, and then it's revealed that Lex Luthor had actually planted a bomb in the wheelchair. And so the senator figures it out a little bit too late, because Lex Luthor was actually supposed to be sitting in on that meeting, and yet his chair was empty because he had gone to the bathroom before the meeting. or he had to go to the bathroom before the meeting, and coincidentally. And so she looks at his chair, it's empty. She looks at the man in the wheelchair. Superman sees that something's wrong. He looks over at the man in the wheelchair, and before he can do anything, it explodes, killing everyone in that room, including Lex Luthor's assistant. And everybody, of course, the explosion is big enough to kind of blow a hole in the Capitol, and everybody freaks out on both sides. Obviously, it's like, oh my God, what's going on? And at first, you think that this is a plan to blackmail Superman. Basically, say, oh, Superman caused this, when that's not the case. And anyway, during the flames, after the bomb explodes and while everything's on fire, Superman kind of puts his head down a little in shame, like, I should have done something. I should have done something. I should have known. Of course, he's still alive because Man of Steel. Now, during that whole event, we know that Batman was watching it on live TV, and he also finds out that the guy in the wheelchair's either crazy or up to no good, because he sees that he's the spokesperson for the meeting, and it's like, why is he doing this? They don't know why he's doing that, and Bruce Wayne is like, don't we send him money every month? And like, yeah, we send. His assistant says, yes, we send him money every month, Mr. Wayne. He's like, let me see the last. Let me see the last check. Blah blah blah. And so we see that notes have been written on the checks that he gets every month. And the last note we see is the one we saw in the previews that says, you let your family die. And everyone thinks that that was the Joker or even Jason Todd trying to get to Batman, in a sense. But it turns out it was Lex Luthor writing those notes to get Batman even more raged against Superman. By basically telling him, you let this happen, you didn't stop Superman, or you didn't stop Superman, you didn't stop that alien invasion, you didn't do anything. And your family, his Wayne family, basically, your family died because of that. And it works, in a sense. It really does. Because again, that seed was already planted in there, and now it's just growing. And so we see... the next thing we see is Clark going to his mom, who's always the voice of reason, and talking to her, and she tells him, be their hero, Clark. Be what they need you to be, or what they want you to be. Or be none of it. Because you don't know this world a thing. You never did. Basically telling him, if you want to be a hero, be their hero. If you be what they need you to be, savior, be what they want you to be. Either a savior or villain in the case of the people who hate Superman. Or be none of it. Do nothing at all. And so you don't know this world a thing, and in a sense that's true, because all Superman really did was, yes, Earth is his home now, but Superman just was, basically thrown to Earth by his parents. And yes, he was the only people that he owes anything are his Earth parents. Those are the only people, in my opinion, that he owes anything at all. In the long run. But you get what I mean. And so we see, the next thing we see is Wonder Woman returning the information to Batman, because supposedly there was it was decrypted and she couldn't decrypt it. So Batman goes to decrypt it, and here we see one of the, in my opinion, one of the best scenes in the movie, the best segment of the movie. we get to see Nightmare Batman, quote unquote, whose costume is based off a comic book that I can't really remember at the time, so forgive me on that. But we see Nightmare Batman, and and it shows a post-apocalyptic future, so to speak, and we see Batman meet up with his with people, the rebellion, so to speak, and because we see a bunch of soldiers dressed in black, military grade guys, helmets, everything, with the Superman shield, the S on their shoulders, so Superman soldiers, and we see Batman meeting up with some of his own people, and we see that one of his contacts has supposedly gotten a hold of kryptonite. But it turns out, as Batman gets in the truck and goes to look in the box, it's just a green light bulb. And so the guy says, "I'm sorry for this." Batman looks at him like, "What?" And Superman soldiers pop out. One was even disguised, and throws off his cloak, and they start shooting all the rebels, so to speak. And Batman screams, "No!" And he gets understandably upset, and he starts punching and even killing people and using guns. And that's also another thing that really upset people. People didn't agree with is the fact that Batman killed in this movie. Batman used guns, and they have to remember that this movie is based on The Dark Knight Returns, where he does in fact use guns, and because he's an older Batman, and frankly just doesn't care anymore. And so we see Batman killing, and then the next thing we see is kind of demons floating from the sky, and winged creatures floating from the sky, going all around the place, and we're kind of wondering what those are. Could they just be figments of his imagination? Could this really be a dream? Could what is it? And in my opinion, it's actually a reference to parademons, or Darkseid's little minions. And so I think, don't quote me on this, I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but I do believe that the Justice League movies are going to more than likely have Darkseid as the main antagonist. Maybe, I'm hoping, because in my opinion it seems that Marvel and DC are competing so much to try to get the two most known teams out there, the Avengers and the Justice League. Both teams who have had almost every superhero in both universes on their teams. Both who actually have split into different fractions. The Justice Society of America, the Justice Society, the West Coast Avengers, East Coast Avengers. Different fractions of basically almost the same team. Again, so I think those parademons symbolize Darkseid, but again, I'm not completely sure. That's just my opinion. Anyway, we see that Batman's overpowered, and he's trying to fight all these Superman soldiers, but he's overpowered, and then he's, hanging up. He's chained up, hanging up, and then we see Superman soldiers standing kind of at attention against the walls. It's underground, and there's walls there, and they're standing at attention against the walls with their rifles. And then we see Superman just kind of fly in and then just land on one knee, superhero pose, superhero landing. And then we see Superman stand up, and as he stands up, the rest kneel down. The Superman soldiers kneel before him, and Superman has this angry look on his face, just this look of the only other time we've seen this look is when he looked at Zod with hatred, and Superman's giving Batman the same look. And we see Superman go and rip off Batman's mask, and we see Superman hold it up, look at his mask, and then look back at him, and we hear Superman say, "She was my world, and you took her from me." And we're kind of wondering, like, obviously he's talking about Lois, but what happened, you know? And so Superman lays his hand on Batman's chest, and then basically, we don't see it, but more than likely, punches his hand through Batman's chest, and Batman screams and wakes up. But as he wakes up, we see this blue light and this flashing lights, and we can't really tell, but there's a figure in the light, and we're kind of wondering who it is. And the figure's saying, "Bruce, Bruce," and Bruce is like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And then we see a mask kind of lift up to reveal the Flash, and the Flash wearing his mask, and he says, "You were right about him, Bruce. Lois, she's the key. She's always been the key. You were always right." And then Bruce is still looking at him, like, kind of like, what the hell's going on? And we hear the Flash say, "I came back. I went too far back." He's like, "But it's not too late." And then the Flash basically leaves, and then that's when we see Bruce really wake up. So we're kind of, after that, we kind of left wondering, so was him seeing the Flash a dream? And my thoughts on that part is, my thoughts on that are, it wasn't a dream. It was the Flash, obviously traveling back through time, because obviously, if he knows who Bruce is, then the Justice League has been formed. But the Flash has traveled back through time to warn Bruce about Superman. I'm gonna go ahead and guess on that one, due to you were always right about him. Him more than likely being Superman, and so we see again. Flash has traveled back through time, and maybe that's a certain timeline where Superman did take over the world, and Superman did become kind of evil. Basically the Injustice storyline. But then, with the rest of the events of the movie that I'll explain here in a minute, that timeline was diverted. So it's now an alternate timeline. There was that timeline, now there's this timeline, Anyway, the next thing we see is that everything's been decrypted. Batman opens up the files, and it turns out that Lex Luthor has been keeping an eye on other people, because there's other files. Obviously, the Flash, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Cyborg, and we see these files and we're like, hey, but the only one Bruce opens up is Wonder Woman. And he finally finds out that she's Wonder Woman because of an old picture in Belgium during World War I. Taken during World War I, he sees her with a group of guys, and he's like, holy crap, that's her. Anyway, so we see Batman send the files to Wonder Woman, and we see her open them up. He says, "It is you. Who exactly are you?" And she sees the picture, and she's like, oh crap, he figured me out. And then we see her open up the other files, so we actually finally get a chance to see, the other members of the Justice League. We get to see the Flash, and we see Ezra Miller basically in a store stopping a robbery. Then we see Aquaman. We see Jason Momoa playing Aquaman as a unmanned vehicle that has a camera is recording him, and Aquaman's looking at it, kind of leans back, and then just punches it. And then we see Cyborg, and we get to see the creation of Cyborg. And what I mean by that is, we see Victor Stone already on a table, and he's already had his accident. He's missing the arm, he's missing his legs, His face is, all messed up. I think he's missing part of his head, part of his, not part of his brain, but part of his head, um, that part of his face, is messed up, and we see that his dad has a mother box. And so that's another indication of, hey, Darkseid might be in the next Justice League movie. Because you can't have a mother box without Darkseid, And for those of you who don't know, mother box is basically a device that can send people to and from places. But it can also heal people. It can also fix certain technology. And in this case, it heals Victor because the mother box activates, and then we see the mother box float towards Victor, and then just attach to him and start changing him, and then we hear Victor crying out in pain, and then his dad shuts off the camera. And so, from that, again, we see that we already know that when the Justice League is formed, everyone's gonna obviously have their powers. And the next thing we see is Superman running into Lex Luthor. Or meaning Lex Luthor. Because Lex Luthor pushes Lois Lane off of a building. And Superman catches her and then flies up to Lex Luthor. Because at this point, Lex Luthor has gotten Zod's body, and he has transformed it and mutated it according to the Kryptonian computer on the ship with his own DNA. And so we see that the people who guessed that Zod becomes Doomsday were right. And I kind of hate that it was given away before the movie came out. But, it is what it is. Anyway, we see Superman ask him what he's done, and obviously Lex Luthor doesn't tell him, but all he tells him is that Superman's mom is in danger. And he proves it by giving Superman photos, and Superman, obviously gets angry and goes to shoot his heat vision. But he tells him, if you kill me, you won't find out where she is. So Superman has to kind of obey him, and he tells him, bring me the head of the bat. So Superman flies off to Gotham, and where Batman who's been training, who's actually stolen the kryptonite by this point, and made it into weapons of his own. We see him in his mech suit again, based off of the Dark Knight, and it's actually a really, really, really close adaptation. And I loved the suit. The suit was absolutely awesome. I loved it. And we see Batman stand up to Superman, and we see that Batman has set up traps. Batman is in no mood to talk at this point. He's done talking. He wants to fight Superman. And Superman's trying to tell him, hey, look, Lex Luthor's behind all of it. Well, again, Batman's not having it. So, the fighting ensues. And at first, of course, Superman has the upper hand, super strength, stuff like that. Batman's protected by his mech suit. Superman tells him, stay down. If I wanted it, you'd be dead already. But, Batman doesn't give up easily. Batman uses basically kryptonite grenade launcher, launches it. Kryptonite hits Superman in the face. Superman inhales the gas. He's weakened. And then Superman goes to punch Batman, and Batman catches it with his arm and looks at Superman like, yeah, I got you now. And then, again, fighting ensues. Superman gains his strength back. Batman hits him with another shot of kryptonite. At the last possible second, proceeds to beat Superman. Finally, we see that the ace in the hole was Batman's kryptonite spear. Batman had saved a kryptonite spear, just for this moment. Superman's beaten, weakened, and he grabs the spear and shows it to Superman. And as he's talking, he goes and cuts Superman's cheek to show that, he can. And then comes one of the most controversial moments in the film, where Batman has his foot on Superman's right here, Superman's chest and throat, and still in a mech suit, so the boot's pretty big, and Superman says, "Martha, you're letting him kill Martha." And as we all know, that's Batman's mother's name is Martha, and we find out it's Superman's Earth mom name. And Superman says, "Why did you say that name?" And he's getting upset, kind of mad, and finally Lois says it's his mom's name. And again, people made jokes about this. People even made a meme about this with Civil War. And they took Cap and said, "Oh, my mother's name's not Martha." And Tony, "Oh, neither's mine. Captain America: Civil War." They made jokes about it, but if you really think about it, it's actually pretty damn good. It's actually a pretty good move on the writer's part, because what's the one thing that can stop Batman? That Batman himself has said can stop, and is the only thing that can stop him. As we know, Batman will stop for nothing at all. Shot, stabbed, even if there's a hostage, the only thing that will stop Batman is his parents. And again, Batman's even said it himself. If you don't believe me, there is a YouTube video out there that you can look up. Batman explains how to defeat the Justice League. And the very last one that he explains is himself. And again, it was done in the Tower of Babel, where Ra's al Ghul took Batman's parents out of their grave and was going to revive them. And via the Lazarus Pit. And as we all know, that wouldn't have ended well, because anybody who goes into the Lazarus Pit comes out, different. And they come out almost like an animal, due to the fact of the Lazarus Pit being used to bathe so many people before it, and the Lazarus Pit holding basically the personality of the people who bathed in it before. So you've got crazy people in there, Anyway, so the only thing that can stop Batman is his parents. And the mention of his mother was enough to, why'd you say that name? And then Lois saying it's his mother's name is showing Batman, this guy has humanity. He may not be human, but he has humanity. He has an Earth mom? Even if it wasn't an Earth mom, he has a mom? He has someone who loves him as their own son? If you think about it, it's enough to make somebody actually think. And I'm not saying it's the best scene, in the movie, or even in the history of movies. But the people ragging on the scene probably aren't thinking a lot about it, if you catch my drift. Now, if you didn't like the scene, that's perfectly fine. That's your opinion. I'm just stating my opinions, obviously. Anyway, so we see Superman get up, now kind of the kryptonite's wearing off, and Batman kind of throws the spear away. Lois helps throw the spear away. She goes and dumps in a pool of water, and where it sinks. And I don't know why she did that, to be honest with you. It was kind of stupid to me, considering what happens next. Anyway, Batman ends up saving Superman's mom. Greatest fight scene of all time. And then we see Superman going to Lex Luthor, and then Lex Luthor introducing Doomsday. And then we see Wonder Woman come in. As Batman comes back, he's going as Doomsday, blasts heat vision and out of his mouth. It comes out of his mouth as well now. At Batman's about to die. Wonder Woman jumps in with her shield. And so we see the trifecta, if you will. We see the big three. Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman. All working together. And the fight ensues. And then Lois goes to they explain to Lois kryptonite's its weakness. It's from as Superman says, it's from my Earth, has my same weaknesses. Kryptonite, you know. And so we see Lois go back to try and get the spear because, again, you know, she was stupid enough to just, oh, here, you know, Batman's not going to use it. No one was going to use it. Anyway, so she gets it, but she gets stuck. Something happens where the building comes down and blocks the water, so she can't come up. And Superman, as they're fighting, Superman hears it, and he goes to save her. He does save her, and he brings out the kryptonite spear. And I will mention up to this point that every time Doomsday is hurt, he actually gets more powerful. So we didn't even get to see the full Doomsday with the spikes and, you know, spikes going out of elbows, hand, stuff like that. But we do see some spikes. We see some spikes coming out of, you know, the arms, you know, stuff like that, out of the back. And so we see Superman kind of, you know, looking at what's going on. Wonder Woman has Doomsday in the lasso. Batman's kind of getting up, you know, from being knocked around. And then we see Superman talking to Lois, and he says, I love you. This is my world. You're my world. And she knows what he's about to do, and she doesn't want him to do it, but he has to. He grabs the kryptonite spear and starts to fly as fast as he can. Of course, the kryptonite's hurting him, you know, he's in pain, but he keeps going. Batman sees what's going to happen, and he fires his last kryptonite grenade, if you will, at Doomsday, blasts Doomsday in the face with it. Doomsday breathes it in, he's weakened, and Superman, Wonder Woman's holding him down with the lasso. Superman charges in and stabs Doomsday in the heart with a spear. Doesn't quite go in all the way, so Superman's, you know, they're fighting. Doomsday stabs Superman. Superman's in pain. He's like, ah. And since he's weakened, it goes right through. And finally, Superman gets, you know, his second win and shoves the spear all the way in. Doomsday's about to explode again, but doesn't, and they're both dead. Everyone's sad. Yeah, everyone's crying. Lois is crying. Superman gave his all. And we see two funerals. We see a funeral held for Superman, and we see a funeral held for Clark Kent. And of course, nobody else besides, you know, the main people know who Superman really was. And so we see Clark Kent's obituary in the paper, and of course Superman's death made the front page. And we see that Clark's body was actually buried by his dad's. And we see that Superman's burial was basically an empty coffin because, again, we see that his Clark's body was buried by his dad's. And I'll explain why here. I'll explain more here in a minute. But we also see kind of a cool thing. We see the black and silver Superman symbol, because when the military people remove the flag off the coffin, it's a full black coffin with a silver Superman S. So it kind of makes you wonder, is Superman gonna, in the Justice League, is Superman gonna have that black suit with the silver S? You know, I don't know. And also the Air Force does the missing man formation. 5 planes go overhead, and then one of the planes goes and flies off. Anyway, so Batman and Wonder Woman have kind of a chat, and he tells her to go find the others and to get them ready to fight. And she says, to fight? Why? He says, it's just a feeling. So he tells her to get them ready to fight, and then the very last thing we see is Superman's coffin in the ground. And again, this is how you can tell there's Clark's body's there, and the government didn't take it to bury, you know, as Superman. We see the dirt being thrown over, as it usually is in funerals, and then we see the dirt start to shake and then rise up. So what I said earlier in the video this movie is based on 2 comics is, again, Dark Knight Returns and then the death of Superman. Again, the death of Superman, for those of you who don't know, again, Superman does fight Doomsday and loses, to tie, basically. He defeats Doomsday, but he's killed, only to later find out he was just taking a really long nap. And so, in essence, that's what's happening here, is he's taking a nap, taking a power nap. And so, that ends the movie. Now, my thoughts on the movie, again, this movie was actually really, really decent. It wasn't the greatest movie in the world, but it was good. And I enjoyed it. I loved seeing, 2 comics come to life. I loved I actually liked Ben Affleck as Batman. I really did. He pulled off a great Bruce Wayne. Basically the emotion, the raw emotion, was portrayed really well. And I've seen that raw emotion before in Ben Affleck, in Jersey Girl, in The Town, in some of his movies, and people dog on him all the time about Daredevil, but Daredevil wasn't so bad either, in my opinion. It really wasn't. I will admit the acting was but it wasn't that bad. Again, the raw emotion of anger, basically, that he has was actually really good. And then I enjoyed Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I think she'll do a great job in the solo film, and then again in Justice League. I really do. Henry Cavill, always great as Superman. Last I heard, he was training. He was doing training, exercising, keeping in shape for the Justice League movie. If you don't believe me, check out his Instagram. I believe he also has a Twitter. Check out his Instagram. Follow him on Instagram. He was working out for the Justice League movie. Keep in shape, Anyway, this movie was good. It was decent, and if I had to rate it on a 1 to 10 rating, I would rate it a decent 7 out of 10. The reason I say 7 out of 10 is because the acting was good. The plot was actually pretty good. Again, it's based off, 2 of the greatest comic books ever in the history of ever. The reason I give it a 7 out of 10, though, is because I feel it was rushed. I really do. And, DC, Warner Brothers, they want to... I feel like they want to rush the Justice League. They want to beat the Avengers, ever since the Avengers first came out, the very first Avengers movie was a huge success, and ever since then, DC's been trying to play catch up. And in my honest opinion, maybe one day they will. But unfortunately, it's not that day. DC does great on their own, and as a matter of fact, DC does great animated movies. Teen Titans versus the Justice League actually just came out not too long ago, and it was great. I'll do a review on that one next if you all want me to. But honestly, it was great. It really was. And the DC, the animated universe, again, is great. It's the live-action universe that I feel they're rushing. With the animated universe, they can do, whatever they want. The Justice League's already in there, Teen Titans already in there, they can do whatever they want. But with the live-action universe, the cinematic universe, I believe they should have taken their time. Marvel took their time, introduced the separate characters, brought the team together, and then, bam, Avengers. Avengers Age of Ultron. Captain America Civil War. As well as they also, as well as having, individual movies in between. Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, Captain America, Winter Soldier. They built it up. And they also gave us something to hold us over in the meantime. And with Warner Brothers and DC, I don't see that. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and blame them. I really don't blame them for wanting to play catch-up and for wanting to beat the Avengers. I mean, obviously there's more people that like the Justice League than they like the Avengers, But I want to see a movie done right. I really do. If we are going to get a Justice League movie, I want to see it done right. And I don't want to see it rushed, because if it is rushed, then I feel like the same problems are going to happen in Batman vs Superman. Rushed, people saying it doesn't make sense, people not liking some of the dialogue. His mom's name Martha. Same problems are going to happen if this continues, in my opinion. But again, I'm running out of time here. This video's gone on long enough. My final opinion: 7 out of 10 on Batman vs Superman. And in my next video, I'll do a follow-up on the comparison of Civil War versus Batman vs Superman, if y'all want me to. But I'm actually really feeling about doing Alice in Wonderland through the Looking Glass. I really am. It actually looks really good. Excited to see Alice back. So I believe I'll do a review on that one next. As a matter of fact, I also might do the one after that might be a review on the movie The Darkness, a movie that I saw recently that was actually fairly good, and I enjoyed it. But again, that's all my time. I'll see you guys next time.